and quite the significant day here in Nazareth, right, at the first day of the G20 Leaders Summit. With me, Dr. Imraan Buccus, political analyst and senior research associate at the Auwal Socio-Economic Research Institute and a post-doctoral fellow at the Durban University of Technology. Doctor, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you here on the show. Let's first start with, we can't go all negative tonight because it's been a significant day, right, for South Africa, for Africa. And perhaps let's start there because we can't ignore the significant moment that took place this morning.
No, absolutely. I don't think it's all negative. I think it's a great moment for South Africa. Africa hosting the G20 for the first time is certainly significant. I think the other significant thing is the global north has always defined the global south. And now you have this tiny nation on the southern tip hosting a really significant event. I think many people thought that, South Africa is in the eye of the storm, if you like. ICJ, Russia, Ukraine, South Africa-US relations, critical minerals, the general positioning of South Africa. And people also thought we won't get a declaration. Well, many of us were skeptical, how would we get a declaration when we had such a fragmented start? And here we have a declaration even earlier than expected. So I think that was strategic. So I think all is not lost. I think we've done well. And we've shown to the world that we can host this and we can do it successfully, despite the US not being here.
How did you react to that moment? Because it was quite unexpected, right? We're getting this opening address and then we're thinking, okay, we're done, or the president still continues, and then boom, we hear about an overwhelming consensus, and that's when a lot of us could not unhear what we just heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that came as a complete surprise. Right? I think there was a great deal of uncertainty about whether we would reach that point. But I think we've exerted our own power in a particular way. I think very often when we think about human rights, when we think about what's happening in the world, human rights is sometimes used as an instrument to exert power. And I think we've used it as an instrument of resistance, not only in terms of power, confronting power, but really in terms of how we viewed the ICJ, in terms of how we viewed South Africa and the US. South Africa held its ground. The threat that came from Trump in the latter part of it, that warning South Africa that they should not reach a declaration. And I think Ramaphosa held his own. And in that regard, I think we certainly can be proud.
And we look at some of the countries, the leaders of the countries who came. I'm thinking, for example, Turkey, and how they've been vocal on the issues of the Middle East, for example. And it does signal that it was not only about the issues of trade, right, the issues of the global economy and all of that, but there were also serious issues that are at play in the world, conflicts and all of that, that some of the leaders here do share some similar views on.
No, absolutely. I think it is the time of the global south. Right? We're seeing the global south assert itself, not only with some of the global south countries you're talking about here, but also in terms of BRICS, in terms of ASEAN, in terms of other multilateral forums. I think the morality of countries in the global north has been called into question. In large part, Gaza has done that. For a long time, conflicts have happened in the Middle East. Israel has attacked Gaza several times. There have been several massacres. But I think this time round, the world has stood up. Even countries of the global north, like the UK and France, have taken positions that certainly have not been as supportive of Israel like they were in the past. And on many other fronts, the global south is asserting itself. So we've seen this here. The global south is not a unified body, right? Even within BRICS, you have a number of fractures. But in terms of a power block, there certainly are areas of consensus and coming together.
How far does this assertion go? Because if you make your voices heard, and you come together. Of course, you're not always going to agree, but how far do you go to make sure that you not only have a seat at the table, but you determine, even as we've seen through the agenda and the declaration and the conversations that have been taking place, what should also be part of the discussions?
I think forums like this are difficult. You know, you've had, Indonesia, India, Brazil host the G20, and now you have South Africa. So in many ways, a centering of global South concerns around debt, around sustainability, around inequality, etc., etc. But next year, the G20 goes to the US, and in subsequent years, it stays in the global North. So I think we all know if it goes to the US under a Trump administration, certainly some of the gains here will be disrupted when you think about debt, when you think about climate change, etc. So I think it's a matter of continuity and change, continuity and disruption. So I think, you know, as we reach the G20 next year and in the subsequent years, we're going to see a focus that looks more at issues that affect the global North.
And do you think then, if that were to happen, you now have a G20 that could run the risk of not identifying with the problems that the global South is facing? Or will it be understood that it's just a year, you can get to the next year and be able to perhaps bring some issues back?
Yeah, no, certainly. I think there was coherence between Brazil, you know, handing over to us. There's a solidarity between Brazil and South Africa that goes back a long way. But yeah, continuity and change, there will certainly be issues that remain on board, but there will also be issues that don't focus on the global South, you know, that have an agenda. You know, if you have a start where even solidarity and equity are questioned and sustainability, I think that's a clear indication of what we are to expect in 2026.
So when you then, as a final one then, when you think about how much of geopolitics, right, have gotten us to a point where we've seen some countries that would have originally, had a different ally coming together today, and a culmination of some 130 odd meetings. We've seen some of the countries participate as well. How much of the geopolitics in terms of the shift would you say also contributed to where we are?
The geopolitics in terms of what was happening between those countries, amongst those countries?
When you look at just geopolitically, for example, you think about the US and the positions it's taken. You think about some of the, the countries, Canada. You think about how the US at some point would also just arbitrarily put those tariffs in place, and then also question some of the decisions that the countries are taking and causing some tensions, when you look at some of the geopolitics. So one wonders, when you think of some of the other countries who came today, how much of that, that push by the US, the tensions by the US, the fragmented approach, the isolation by the US isolating itself from the world, also got the leaders here?
Yeah, no, so there are two parts to it, right? So one, US, South Africa, they certainly played, hardball with us. And the US remains a really important country to South Africa, right? Trade, 600 US companies here, AGOA, etc. So there is a need for some form of appeasement. I don't think we can reject the US. At the same time, I don't think we can succumb to the US. But I think you need a mixture of what former Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool spoke about recently, the idea of appeasement and contingency. Thinking about pivoting to countries like China and to the East. But we've also seen a solidarity amongst countries of the global North that, came together with the declaration, supported the policy stance in large part of South Africa. So I think despite the kind of geopolitical machinations of the US, South Africa came out, if you like, as victors, because many of these countries came out in support of South Africa.
How much of that amplifies our voice to the world?
No, I mean, we're a country that punches above its weight. And we've always done that. And we've remained a significant force in SADC, in the African Union, in the G20, in BRICS. We've been the first African country on BRICS, and we certainly, have had our voices heard. And this idea at the end about amplifying African voices, I think we play a great role in taking that idea forward.
A lot of leaders echoing your sentiments there who have been in conversation with us throughout the afternoon. And Doc, appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much for stopping by.